It's called Unlocking AI, Back to the Future. So we have our very own, who's old enough to remember this, Marty McFly and Lorraine Baines. Thank you very much. And this is to complement the earlier session from the other team. There will be no questions for this one, so you can ditch your Slido now, I guess. So over to you two. Oh, sorry. What are you most proud of?
Thank you. I'll keep us on track.
Thanks very much.
Welcome. I think proudest moment. So for those of you who know me, I describe myself as a failed psychologist. So my proudest moment is also probably one of my worst, which was working in private law and contact proceedings. And I saw my first client after about 2 years. They'd turned back up and they'd met a new partner who was domestically abusive, and they'd met them in the waiting room of my event. And it was that point I realised I was the Cilla Black of the forensic psychology world. But that led me on to pursuing impact on a larger scale. So nice. Proud and the worst, yeah.
Nice, thank you. Chantelle? Oh, are you on? You turned on.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, thanks.
Brilliant. My background is in housing, and I've led operational teams and sat on a couple of boards in the housing sector. My proudest moment is a bit of a generalisation, really, but the fact that I've been able to deliver teams and have strategic influence in making sure that a wide range, thousands of people have been able to access secure accommodation and sustain their tenancies and really thrive in their lives.
Thanks very much. Over to you two. Unlocking AI, Back to the Future. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So in this session, we're going to be talking about the future possibilities of AI, unlocking its potential, and also we're going to touch on how we can navigate the ethical challenges. Before we get into the detail, can I just ask people to put their hands up if they're currently using any form of AI? Brilliant. And can I ask you to put your hands up if you've got concerns or worries about the way that AI is heading? Interesting. Similar number. Okay. So the reality is that AI is here to stay. We know this. We heard from some amazing speakers this morning who touched on some of the challenges that we might need to navigate. But what I want to really kind of stress is that we should still embrace AI, and the risks and challenges shouldn't deter us from the opportunities that it can present. So I won't have a lot of time, as we know, to go into full details about all of the ethical considerations. But what I can do is tell you a little bit about how AI works and talk you through a real-life example of a time where a model was developed and trained and ethical considerations weren't at the forefront. So that will give you a bit of an idea of some of the things that you should avoid when developing these types of tools. So how does AI work? So AI models are trained using data that's input, and they use that to train on predictions, make predictions in terms of the output data. So I know that one of the speakers this morning talked about machine learning. Essentially, when data is input into any kind of model, the tool will recognize and remember and then make predictions for how the outputs, what the outputs should look like in terms of the data and the tool. So, sorry, spare me a minute. So, I'm just train of thought. Challenges, yes, the challenges. So, whilst there might be some challenges in terms of, so essentially what we should do is ensure that when we are developing any AI tools, that we're using a wide and broad and diverse range of data to ensure that the quality of the outputs of these tools is appropriate and correct. Essentially, the analogy we use is if you put rubbish in, you're going to get rubbish out. Okay, so I'm going to move on to a real life example of a creator in New York who had developed an artificial intelligence facial recognition system. And when training this model, this creator used machine learning and used images of mainly white people to train and develop the tool. They didn't have any internal or had limited internal processes in place to check the integrity of the output data before this model was released to the public. What happened was that a black reporter had purchased this tool and quickly found that the model wasn't able to recognize their face. So the unintended consequence of this was that there was racial bias and indirect discrimination towards certain groups because they weren't able to access the tool and it hadn't been a consideration in the development. So what does this tell us in terms of what we need to be thinking about and navigating in terms of ethical challenges? This tells us that we need to make sure that we keep all of the ethical considerations at the forefront of our minds. Some of the things you need to think about are ensuring that you've got robust internal processes to check the integrity of the development of your data. I think the key point here is that artificial intelligence doesn't replace human intelligence. So we should still make sure that there is human involvement in any kind of decision making. We also need to make sure that we're using broad and diverse ranges of data. We've touched on that quite a lot, but it's key. And we also need to make sure that we're adhering to data privacy and data collection, GDPR and data protection laws, because those responsibilities and our responsibilities in terms of sensitive data don't fall away just because AI is introduced. We also need to be thinking about the environmental impact of developing AI tools, because when you are training and developing large models, it does have an indirect or direct impact on energy consumption, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess my passing message is that AI is a powerful tool. It's something that if we keep ethical and ethics at the forefront of the development of these models, we'll be able to ensure that it influences great social impact. What I'm going to do now is pass over to Brian, who's going to tell us a little bit about the benefits of using AI and its future opportunities.
Thank you. Thank you. So yes, I reckon I get the easy job when it comes to this conference. Admittedly so, the graveyard shift, and I can hear stomachs rumbling, etc. But bear with me. I don't have to really talk about all of the things that's been discussed, the ethics, anything else. My job at Trust Impact is to discuss research and innovation, which means I get to talk about really interesting things and pose difficult and interesting questions. I think there's three really big opportunities going forward. And I'm sure the panel at the beginning will tell you that timescales are a little bit grey in this area in terms of when this will become available to us. But we're talking for artificial general intelligence, probably 18 months to 3 years. I'm looking for contradictions. We're talking about superintelligence, 10, 15 years. Some of the stuff I'm about to discuss is way far out, which means I'm making predictions a little bit in the dark. Some of it is a little bit closer to home, but we are going to show you where we think this is going. The opportunities we think that are going to become available are AI is going to make data collection, collation, particularly collation and analysis, much more accessible. It's going to allow us to do this in real time, and it's going to allow us to unlock innovative data sets that we never had opportunity to use before. Things that have been hidden behind paywalls, things that have been hidden behind just access problems. We think that, I think it was brought up on one of the panels earlier on about quality assurance as a how do you quality assure. I think eventually we can get AI to do some of this for us. We can get AI to automatically consider inconsistencies and outliers in data. We can do that in real time and remove it. We can free up resource that we would have otherwise used to create better impact and work with beneficiaries. And finally, and probably the most exciting, although again, I acknowledge the challenges, particularly around policing, and as a person who spent a lot of time at the NSPCC, we had similar conversations about whether we could use this. But predictive analytics and trend forecasting. Not only are we able to use that as an evaluative tool, but we will eventually be able to do this in real time. And by that, I'm not talking about crime prediction or stopping child abuse necessarily. What I'm talking about is the opportunity to guess what your impact's going to be in an informed manner. And that I will talk about shortly in a demonstration. But to get there, we think there's a framework around this. And we think there's effectively three elements. We think there is a predictive, an emergent, and a direct. We think the predictive element here is about taking big data sets and using AI-powered analysis to predict what the impact is you could have with the people you want to have it. And that's really crucial. Previously, we've made guesses in terms of deprivation statuses, tried to find data sets that would support our target populations, if we've got there. Going forward, with the work of collaboration, participation, we can start to identify who it is we want to work with, how we get some of that data to know whether we're having an effect. There's some examples here of what information you could take. We can look at things like political analysis. We can think about electricity or gas consumption. These are all data sets that are far too big at the moment for one single person in a charity to work with. But with the power of AI, we should start to be able to bring this together. When we think about the emerging, and I'm particularly passionate about this, this is something that we have not done, or I've not seen done within the charity sector. We're talking about utilizing non-invasive, routinely collected data. This is data that is out there. This is things that you provide freely at this moment in time without thinking about. This is your Google searches. This is your wearables. This is the things that you pass off as information and never consciously think of providing, which may give us indications of impact. Here we're talking about live stuff, traffic and mobility data. How do people move around cities in real time? What happens when you change things? Public health metrics, social media monitoring. Less said about that for the moment. Internet of Things devices, stuff you never thought about. Imagine if you're a fuel poverty charity and suddenly you've got the opportunity to look inside fridges, cameras in fridges, you've got wearables, doorbells, you've got foot traffic through Google popular places. All of this information you could bring together to monitor whether the predictive statements you've made are beginning to come true. And finally, you've got the direct. This is stuff that we are getting to right now. We're starting to collect this better, but what we're also doing by looking at the first two elements is free up our ability to collect this data. This is no longer about collecting data from every single one of your beneficiaries, but it's about collecting the stories of impact. It's about understanding the difference you made rather than just the number of people you work with. And it's when you bring all of that together, you can start to do really interesting things with that impact. You can think about less about case studies and more about things like photo voice and self-documentation, field-based observations, stuff that is more research intensive, but has the ability to generate some of the most nuanced and rich stories out there. So I said I would talk about the next bit, and I think it's sometimes difficult to picture without seeing it. So I have to give a lot of kudos to the team at Trust Impact before you see this next visualization, because we've probably spent far too much of Matt's time bringing this together, but AI will allow you to do this quicker. AI saves us hours of coding, again, that people have made thoughts around, thank you. Saves us hours of coding. No longer are people spending time running cron jobs or thinking about downloading certain data sets or cleaning them or whatever else it is. So I must emphasize, this is a proof of concept. This is an idea, and I think, again, maybe proof of concept is a strong word, an exploration, I think our panel talked about earlier, and this is exactly what we're doing. So What we've tried to do here is look at big data sets about fuel poverty. Next steps would be doing collaboration, bringing people together. But what we've done is we've grabbed hold of the energy performance certificates for every household in the UK. This is freely available data. We've grabbed hold of the IMD decile for income. So that's our ability to understand the amount of people on benefits, for example, disability learning, living allowance, etc. And we've also looked at whether they're using above or below their annual trends, right down to postcode and individual addresses. All freely available data, by the way. It's just massive. It's 40, 50 gigabytes, and unless you've got a team currently, it's difficult. The future is this won't be as difficult. I'm going to home in here on my hometown, which is Salford. So you'll see that the totals start to change, and I'll talk to you what these totals mean. So I'm looking at Salford here because it's my hometown. We're looking at a small set. This is proof of concept. We're going to drag that down to the IMD decile, which you've heard a lot about. So again, this is the bottom 20% most deprived. And we're going to then look at the current energy rating. This is about your housing stock, your efficiency. If you're living in fuel inefficient houses, you're looking at those grades that are D, E, and F. So I'll just give my colleague a chance to catch up. Thank you. And we want to know whether they can move to something more efficient. So we're looking whether they can move into A, B, and C. This is England's definition of fuel poverty. There are much more information to be added to this. We're then looking to really hone down into whether they're using more energy than they should be. So this is about the amount of money they've got, whether it's fuel efficient, and whether they're spending too much. You can see straight away we're down to costings, which becomes really interesting. And if you follow even further down into just the ward of Blackley and Broughton, you can see straight away we can start thinking about where we target our interventions, what interventions we target, what we might think they might look like. We can even do things which is giving ideas about how much the recommendations to get these people out of. So this is simply double glazing, things like that. £10 million solves Blackley's problem with fuel poverty. Now, I appreciate there are more data, there's more participation, more collaboration to do. This took us 2-3 days. This could be done in a matter of minutes. And that's why we think that this is going to be huge moving forward and where we would like to get to. To get there, I've got some conclusions, and I think they echo very much everybody's sentiment who's already spoken before me. As you'll be unsurprised to know, those conclusions are going to be about starting at purpose. They're going to be about defining that purpose boldly, being clear on who you're working with and why you're working with them. It's going to be about innovating relentlessly. And some people said about exploration and exploration. Exploration and experimentation. We need to really harness the power of this and explore, play, understand, try. Don't publish straight away. We know that those are problems, but experiment, understand, have those conversations. And finally, and I think this was a point Sarah made earlier on, but I'd really like to emphasize, we're moving away from a knowledge industry or a knowledge-based society. This is becoming available at your fingertips. We're moving to a society that is about better questioning, better prompting, better understanding of those issues. And I think that's where we need to move to as your basis for moving into this new world. Thank you.
Ryan, Chantelle, thank you very much.